In opening gunman, gunning the first championship for Latin America, we have from Colombia, Rosario A. Alright, now, in opening opposition, asking the question, football didn't come home, but can debating come home to Greece? Athens A! Now, in closing government with an illustrious history in debating, all the way from Croatia, actually Croatia is pretty close, Zagreb B! In closing opposition with the same scarves and the same institution, Zagreb B! So now passing the mic on to the chair of the EFL Grand Final, Uday Kamath from Australia.
Thanks, Urjit. So, I'll be your chair for this afternoon. I invite the rest of the panel to introduce themselves. I'll just pass the mic around.
Hi everyone, Alam Nasir here. Good luck for the match and congratulations. Hi, Bano, no preference.
Dan, they, them, best of luck. Kia ora, Daniel, he or they.
Daniel Schoening, he, him.
Hi, Tasso. Good luck. Erasmus, all the best.
Alex, she, her, please.
Excellent. In that case, without further ado, I invite the Prime Minister to begin the debate.
Hi, am I audible? Okay, I hear myself, so yeah. Before I start, three things. First of all, POIs, just raise your hand, don't say anything because that distracts me. Secondly, I just wanted to thank Jessica because if from the two of us, you deserve to be here and I'm very proud of you. And finally, I just want to say that the last time I was in an EFL final, I had a panic attack from stage right, and I'm really excited because this time I'm not scared to death, so. Okay. Let's start in 3, 2, 1. Panel. I believe that it is important to understand that we live in a world in which religions constantly conflict with one another. This is true because religious institutions have like the incentive to always spread themselves because they believe that it is part of their tenets to spread their words to the majority of people possible. The problem with this is that, as we stated before, like there are different religious teachings that do not allow people to think in particular ways because they think that the other wants to like over-empower these particular groups. We believe that in our side of the house, we are able to guarantee a greater amount of political dialogue, which reduces the amount of religious tensions in both sides. First, one more, like a quick model as to how this probably looks like, right? First of all, I think that this debate applies mostly in the spaces which tend to be like very like religiously diverse, because these are the spaces in which you are more able to proselytize and therefore like have to implement the strategies of particular syncretisms. Secondly, I think that it is important that you associate deities that have like similar values. We see this, for instance, in the Spanish colonization of America, in which, for instance, we had like certain gods that were associated with generosity being linked to saints such as like Saint Francis of Assisi. I think that this is easier in order for like these places to convince these particular individuals into these spaces. If there are any clarifications, I would like to them right now. No, there are no clarifications. Good. Two arguments from side of government. First of all, why do you increase religious dialogue and therefore like correlatively reduce religious tensions? And secondly, why do the people, particularly the minorities, are better in our side of the house? First of all, let's talk about how does like what happens in regards to these religious tensions, right? I think that this happened because, one, people tend to feel invaded. Secondly, because the dominant culture has like incentives to create stereotypes within these particular groups. And thirdly, because there is no communication with different grounds. Well, why does this happen in a world in which there is religious independence? Three reasons. First of all, insofar as it is true that religious proselytism still happens, it is important that like the majority of people that tend to do that are seen like as an invading force. This is because like they do not have like even if they have like similar values and stuff like that, they still worship different deities. They dress in a different manner. They have like different images that show in these particular things. Therefore, like the people that are receiving this message tend to see these individuals as foreign. In our side of the house, it's more likely that you are have more interests on seeing like symbols that tend to be like very similar and therefore are able to be more receptive to these particular things. And this is good because, one, they are receptive to the message, but secondly, because the majority of these institutions also gives things such as like humanitarian aid. We believe that it is better that people that do not reject this message, because usually it feels like a trade-off in which I either receive the help and betray my religion, or two, like don't get to eat but stay faithful. I think that this trade-off doesn't happen in our side of the house. Secondly, because it is also like this also forces like religious proselytizers to like learn about the deities that you are going to syncretize, right? This is because in order for this message to be things, you have to find these particular links, which means that you will become more educated. We saw this in the Spanish colonization, in which a lot of the preachers actually became very expert in how Native Americans actually thought, and therefore you are less likely to reproduce particular stereotypes. For instance, that certain deities are like akin to devil worship and stuff like that, which means that you do not have incentives to be as hostile to these particular groups. Thirdly, I think it has to do with the places of worship. Even in the best case scenario of opening or opposition as a whole, in which like individuals are peaceful in the first place, it is less likely that you receive things such as like sharing common grounds, worshipping to different individuals and stuff like that, which means that you are in the future able to create stereotypes or to create images because you are not dialoguing, because you are not able to exchange values and stuff of that nature, which makes it more difficult for you to find out the similarities that you have, and you are able to like point out the differences in a better way. In our side of the house, even if we have like different faiths, we are like having like similar spaces of worship, which means that we have incentives to communicate. I'll give it to you in a second with these individuals, which makes it more likely for us to find that we have common values, that we build relationships between one another groups, which means that like the risks for you to going into conflict are higher, because now that these are people that you know, you feel like endeared to them and are less likely going to like either kill them or create bad images of them. Before that, I continue with the minority club.
Right, so you care for political events based on proximity. These wars, or like the turning of Latin America into Christianity was like literally 400 years ago.
I think that preachers still exist in places such as like the Catholic Church, going into parts such as like sub-Saharan Africa. I think that these like preachers still have incentives to do so because, as we stated, religions have an incentives to spread their message around because that is what like they're built for. I think that our things stand. I think that the majority of conflicts that are religious tend to happen because there are different faiths that have like that feel that they are being invaded. Secondly, why is it better for minorities as a whole, particularly when they are facing like these senses of being like visited by certain institutions such as like Western institutions like the Catholic Church and stuff like that? First of all, because in the majority of cases, as we stated before, these groups tend to, like, in order to sweeten the deal and stuff like that, and also because, like, in the majority of cases, their faith tells them to, bring things such as, like, humanitarian help. The thing is that people feel extremely guilty by taking these particular things because they think that they are forced to, like, choose one or another and, have to reject their faith. In our side of the house, one, you have, like, a greater amount, like, access to these spaces because you don't think that you are being betrayed. But secondly, I think that it is also like in the spaces in which like religious changes are happening because there are changes in demographics or stuff of that nature. You have a greater feeling that you like your contribution to that religion is still valuable because you still have a say so, and because you think that you are like being able to move forward into the new religion that is happening in this place, whilst also keeping your traditions, which means that you also don't have like conflicts with your family and stuff like that. I am a child of religious syncretism, and I think that it's great. Vote OG.
Thank you to the Prime Minister. I'd now like to invite the Leader of the Opposition.
Hello? Opening government wants to make this debate about entering new markets, about this soft imperialism like Christianity entering Asia and Africa. We believe that this is also in the debate, but the most important thing is when we're talking about like countries that already exist and have a minority and a majority religion, and I will explain why. So we are basically talking about these countries, right? Why is this true? First of all, like religion, yes, they have an incentive to enter new markets. For example, Christianity has kind of, exhausted all the people that can believe in Christianity in the West, so now they have an incentive to export in Asia and Africa to grow their pie of power and dollars. And it's harder to import directly Christianity to people who consider religion a part of their heritage and of who they are. So you have to kind of adapt it to them. Just like you wouldn't eat like Western people couldn't eat chicken tikka like Indian food, so they adapted chicken tikka masala by a Scottish person. But the most important people we're talking about is when you assimilate the existing population, the existing religious minority. Why is this important? First of all, they have an incentive to do this because they want to share the pie of power and money with less people, especially when it's literally in your territory, right? And second of all, you want to have this political control over these people, but also it is much easier to do it. Why? Because of proximity. What does this mean? First of all, literally, they might be the mosque, the Catholics might be 2 streets next to the Orthodox Christians, so it's literally easier to go next door. Second of all, you need less resources, you need to fly out less priests. Third of all, you know the other priests of the other church literally by name, and you know who are friendly with you, who are not. You can lobby with them easier, do deals with them, etc. Why is this important? Because when you're talking about these societies, a lot of the time, these religions are very tied to your heritage, to who you are. And because they are so tied, I will explain later why they are so important for these minority people. These churches, the majority ones, have an incentive to slowly assimilate you, make you not care so much about your religion, or try to make it look like it's not so big difference. We're all one big church anyway, right? For the reasons I told you. So, for example, they have an incentive to downplay the differences. Oh, you are Irish and Catholic, I am, I don't know, English church. We're not so different after all, right? This, notice, happens in the very, very long term, especially when we're talking about religion. I assume we look at it with a scope of decades or even centuries, with the very big impacts. The important ones are not in the next 3-5 years. I would like the opposition to engage with this, right? So, they have an incentive in the long term to say, for many people, to not care so much about the religion if they're a minority. To be like, we do not say in the census that we are Catholic, first of all. And why is this important for them? Because in the future, they can, in many countries where you have quotas in parliament based on what religion you are, they can literally put a less quota for your MPs, right? Second of all, for your religion to not be taught in schools, be like you're not such a big minority, or the curriculum for our brand of religion already covers yours, etc. So why is this important? Especially when these religions are detrimental for the minority's existence, very tied to their heritage. I'm talking to you as Greek, and we literally, in our flag, have a Christian cross. This was extremely important for us when we were under occupation of the Ottoman Empire for 400 years. What made you Greek was also that you were Christian. If this brand of, assimilating religions together existed under the Ottoman Empire, I would not be here speaking to you. Why is this important? First of all, a lot of the times you lose your heritage. It's tied to your history, your language, your celebrations. Literally, the fact that we celebrate most of my good memories about celebrating Easter, for example, wouldn't have happened if I was not Christian, right? So it literally means a lot of the times to have this ethnicity. And even if, you don't, in the very, very long term, which we believe will happen, you completely silence the religion, a bastardization of the religion is equally bad. The fact that a lot of people think that Indian food is chicken tikka masala, while it was created by a Scottish man, we do not believe it's wrong, right? I think a lot of Indian people would be offended. So even if you do not have complete assimilation, for many people in your country to think of, to think of this bastardized version of your religion as your true religion is very problematic for a lot of people. You actually create more division. You actually do not allow for all the benefits you claim that people will be united and love each other and all of this. And in the long term, which is the most important, you pacify them politically. A lot of people are not going to have not only an incentive, but they will have less leverage. Because why is it important that our religion is organized, right? You have a top-down structure, and especially when you are a religious minority, in order to self-organize, you need this thing. Yes.
By your logic, vast majority of Christians don't celebrate Christmas just because it's on a day of...
Yes, but for majority of Christians, you don't have the bastardization of their religion. Most people know whether they're Orthodox or they're Catholic. Even if they don't believe it so much, their parents really freaking care. And they're if my parents, or their grandparents, right? If my grandparents care, it's probably important for me. The framing is very different, right? Because we're talking about countries where you have both people, especially a minority that a lot of the times might be in difficult situations, I don't know, for example, Muslims in London or something like this, they feeling under attack. So it's very important to have organized religion in order to advocate for your people, for your incentives, etc. And third of all, it's especially imagine you're an immigrant, Greek immigrants going to the USA for the first time, or Muslim immigrants coming to Europe for the first time, it happens now. Even if you're not so religious, where are you going to find people that were grown with the same holidays as you, who believe in the same stuff as you, have the same values as you? That's right, in your local mosque, in your local thing like this. So even if you're not so religious, even if you don't say, oh, I believe this exact dogma of the Orthodox Christianity, in order to find people that think like me in a place where literally all the other people are strangers, speak different language, different country, or things like this. It is imperative for me to have a place where I can feel like home, like back to my country. Third of all, especially, just like we are telling you that, especially, this is in the short term, right, but it's very important. Very religious people will feel under attack, right? You will believe that the people who believe closest to the dogma are also the people who are more likely to be up in arms when their dogma is attacked, because they are the most religious, like their whole life revolves around religion. So when you attack their religion, when they feel betrayed by the leader of their church, they are going to be like, what the fuck? They're more likely to, do some bombing in the church of the opposite side, or, like just be hateful, spew slurs, like all the impacts that you claim, we will have a divided society, things like this. No, you're making it worse, because you are motivating the most angry people, and second of all, in the long term, you're giving much more leverage to the big majority that has an incentive to suffocate silently the minority in the very, very long term, which is the most important way. Why? Because it is literally longer, it is more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Leader of the Opposition. I'd now like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
Hello, can you hear me? Before I start, I would like to say thank you to some few people. The first is Diego, of course. You are the best coach ever, and thanks to you we're here. The second person, of course, is Juanita. You have been the greatest support that we have had to be here. The third person, but not less important, of course, is you. You're the best partner ever, better than I asked for. I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. And the last person I want to say thank you is my boyfriend. He's not here, but he literally paid for the half of my trip because I didn't have the money to come here. So I know you're watching me now. Thank you. I love you so much. Of course, Latinoamérica, Sociedad de Debate de la Universidad Rosario, Colombia, por y para ustedes siempre. Okay, I don't like this. Well, okay. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1, now. 3 things I'm going to do in this speech. Firstly, a clarification of which this motion is important. Secondly, about minorities and how this dialogue is not likely to be abusive. And lastly, I'm going to explain about backlash and how this is not that bad. And then I'm going to weigh those arguments in order to win this debate. Firstly, open opposition says that religions are going to lose the spaces that they have for celebrations in politics. Firstly, the first thing I want to say here is that for this to work, they have to prove that minority religions have those spaces. This is not true for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because they are minorities. That implies that there are less people in the comparative, so probably they have less votes in order to put a congressman in the Congress, so probably that is not true. Secondly, because they are constantly oppressed in the spaces that open opposition says, probably minorities are very oppressed, or they are constantly taken out of the spaces, of the political spaces, because the political spaces are dominant, controlled by the majority of the religions. But thirdly, about celebrations, probably in their side of the house, their celebrations are constantly oppressed or blamed by others that are constantly telling you that this is bad, that this is like a shame or whatever, because you don't have quieter space to do those celebrations. In their side of the house, they have improved because they can do it that minorities are in peace. Minorities are not in peace. In their best case scenario, in opposition, they are excluded from political spaces, or secondly, in the worst case scenario, they are probably being killed be constantly being oppressed and prosecuted because just being for minority religions. In the comparative, and if this is not enough, I'm going to flip this argument. Look, in our side of the house, the minorities are going to increase power. Why? Because now in our side of the house, they are being controlled, or they are like being merged with the majority religions. That implies that they can have the possibility of making political alliance, of introduce to the Congress, of probably have the better spaces to do their celebrations in peace, because now they have the opportunity to have those spaces in peace, because now they are in constant dialogue with the majority religions. We think that in our side of the house, minorities are very, very absolutely better. Secondly, why this dialogue is not likely to be oppressive? I have two reasons here. Firstly, because the syncretism implies that you need to have a space for both religions. That implies that the majority religion, even if they want to be enter into the majority of the spaces, they still have to have a space for the minority religion. In their side of the house, those are different people, and the majority religions are likely to impose their beliefs or their religious figures to the minority religion. So we still have to have a space for the minority. Secondly, because there is a really intense sense of feeling for the religious to the minority followers. That is, the Yazidi people still accepting being killed instead of being converted to Islam. That implies that the minority religions are very likely to fight for the rights, for their beliefs, and for their spaces, because they still value the religion that much. But lastly, because they have strong communities. Even if they are less people, probably they have at least some bargaining power to the majority religion in order for not this be abusive. Look how minorities are best in our side of the house. Firstly, this is not an abusive dialogue, as I already proved. Secondly, that minority religious people will have more independence in our side of the house. In their side of the house, especially in countries when this is there are a lot of religious conflicts and that, they are probably constantly oppressed, or their customs are likely to get out of the public space. That implies that they don't have peace, or they don't have the possibility of being independence. In our side of the house, when they are trying to this dialogue with the majority religion, they will have more independence, or they are not being oppressed. Lastly, they does not feel as they have that they have to betray themselves. In their side of the house, when these people is effectively converted or imposed into other religions, they feel really, really bad, because it is half services or half political participation against my religious belief that I value much more. In our side of the house, these people have the possibility of still having their entering into those public spaces without betraying themselves. We think that minorities are absolutely very in our side of the house. But this argument is also important because this is changing the incentives of the majority religions. In their side of the house, they only have incentives to make this to make this now oppressive way. In our side of the house, they have incentives to dialogue into these minority religions and try to go dialogue between each other and being less hostile in the comparative. We think that the people is absolutely better in our side of the house. Before I continue with the backlash, closing.
Okay, note that our side is where the motion is the status quo. Okay, since you have already big buy in major religions in developing world, how then you have incentive to actually assimilate with indigenous people in a correct way?
Because in your side of the house, actually these people killing each other, that's why this motion matters. In our side of the house, we have created incentives because the religious organization changed the way they do that, the religious privatization or whatever. In our side of the house, these people change incentives in order to dialogue with each other, not killing each other. About the backlash, look, open opposition says a lot of people will feel betrayed, but whatever. In our, I think this is not understandable for three reasons. Firstly, the oppression and the imposed culture will happen anyway. But secondly, we think that religious organizations have the possibility of presenting this as a best way of doing this. In their side of the house, this is going to be hostile. In our side of the house, we have better narratives in order to present these to the followers. But lastly, in your side of the house, our community will be defensive. In our side of the house, probably the services and the public participation of these minority religions will increase. That implies that this doesn't lead to that much backlash. But even if this leads to backlash, firstly, probably it will lead to the most conservative people. That implies that they won't leave for two reasons. Firstly, because they can't keep practicing the religion. Secondly, because you still can maintain some elements that make them feel comfortable. But lastly, because they will see how their conditions can improve in order to syncretism. We think that this won't lead to that much backlash. But in a comparative, we have younger people or the middle ground religions that are worried for a lot of more things that the religion that, for example, have birth certificates or more political participation. We think that these younger people is absolutely very numbers of the house. So we're proving why the minority religions are better, also how we change the incentives of the majority religion, and how we don't have that much backlash in our side of the house. Why are the most important things on this debate those things? Firstly, because there has been historic tensions, especially in these countries. In our side of the house, we prevent the current tensions, but also we prevent future tensions in order to protect more people and keep more people living. Secondly, in their side of the house, the merging will happen anyway, so this is the best way of happening, which you value the culture of the minority religions. But lastly, we're giving more independence to the minority religions. They are like a very present in the status quo. We're protecting these people for all of that. I'm very proud to propose.
Thank you to the Deputy Prime Minister. I would now like to invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Or just I'm ugly. I think it's better, right? Yeah. Great. By the way, before I start, it's our first time ever as an institution to this tournament, and so it's our first major. So I think it's a big and we want to expand the circuit in Greece to also have more people coming to this tournament, so I think it's a big deal for the Greek circuit. Panel. For opening government's case to work, they needed to not have the massive contradiction of Catholic Church very racist, Catholic Church very powerful, but for some dumb reason they're going to listen to minorities and like, oh, you have the same God for land as us, and therefore we're going to trust you and we're going to have discourse. The entire case is built on the false fallacy that the power they have, that they will not misuse, that they will not bastardize the entirety of the religion and not have differences inside it. Basically what they're taking is a false dichotomy. It's not taking independence, it's secularization, it's between dependence and assimilation. We are for independence. What did George tell you? George told you three things. One, he described which types of religions we're talking about, and specifically about minorities in power. Notice that opening government considered this framing to the point they're arguing about Catholic Church being so powerful. The second thing is that George told you how these religions are going to be securitized. Because of the difference in power, there is likely to be bastardization inside the interpretation of the text, and therefore these religious minorities are likely going to be A, pissed off, and secondly, unlikely to buy into it, and if they buy into it, they're just pacified. Thirdly, what George proved to you is three things. One, if you pacify them, you are unlikely to have political unrest that opening government's case needs in order for the political voices to function. The second thing George proved to you is personal impacts of this motion. The point that I no longer have the same relationship I had to the land that my grandparents believed in so much, the point that I don't have the same holidays as my grandparents, my own life fulfillment is massively decreased. Note that even if we don't prove to you big societal impacts, this still stands because us lawless people are negatively affected, even if the religious minorities is still very bad. But the third thing that George proved to you is that ultimately what you lead up is also extremism. To the point that you make an extreme minority very angry, they're likely to backlash against the major majority. We believe it is way better for these vocal minorities than extreme ones. The bottom line is this. It is either a question of independence versus synchronization, but a synchronization is assimilation. Well, the way is very simple. We have four types of way. One, pacification ultimately means that it is very hard for government to push change for this minority to happen. All of the humanitarian bullshit that all is trying to push is not going to happen when you don't have political change inside the minorities, when they are not able to argue in public because they're basically seen as Catholics. The second thing is the long term. The point that you cut the relations that sons and parents have, it is likely that this religion is going to stop working in the long run, basically meaning of taking every right that this of autonomy that these minorities have. But on the third level, the ones who do not buy into the organized part of the religion are likely going to backlash, leading to massive impacts of extremist terrorists, some that OG never even tried to respond. We said, tell you that this is massive because the backlash to that minority is also going to be very negative. Just look at minorities in Europe. Like, sorry, this is a big deal. But 4, even if you don't buy any of this, just the personal level is certain. People are going to be pissed off when the religion takes away the major event and holidays or says all along this was Christian, not part of it. Ultimately, then the debate comes down to how synchronization happens. We tell you that synchronization is likely to happen in a way that is bullshit. Why is that? 3 reasons. The first one is because we consider the opening government's framing, means that the Catholic Church is already established, or whatever major body of religion is already established, and therefore they don't have a massive incentive to change the power. Not the majority of society is likely to believe the institution, meaning that changing significantly the text is likely to also piss off the majority of believers of the Catholic Church or whatever other institution is major. The second thing is that the minority doesn't have that much power, ultimately meaning that they are unlikely to have leverage over how the Catholic Church or whatever other body of institution is likely to interpret the text. Ultimately then, thirdly, what this means is that the Catholic Church or whatever body has the leverage to bastardize the text, meaning that they have no reason to have the conversation that opening government wants. But fourthly, even if the Catholic Church or whatever institution does not care about and is not a villain institution, there are differences between religions that cannot coexist. For example, Native Americans have different relations to land than whatever the fuck St. George believes in about land. Ultimately, when I believe that the land is a spirit, and when the Catholic Church believes the same, I cannot make them the same, even if the Catholic Church wanted to. Ultimately then, that is a bastardization of the religion, making me less likely to believe in a religion in the first place, or cut it from my ties. Ultimately then, this takes down the vast majority of opening cases. Before I move on to more, I'll take one from closer.
Different communities prioritize different things, and that is accepted in the status quo. Why do you think that you would have that coercion being so well done on our side?
Yeah, sure, different religions, they are different things. Our case doesn't have anything to do with that. I don't get it. So, why do religions like to last anywhere in the outside of the house? 2 reasons. One, because small minorities, as OG considered, is the only thing they have in common. So even if they don't synchronize, they're likely to perpetuate that religion. Secondly, there is a narrative to alienate the rest of society against them. For example, as we see in Latin America and the Catholic Church. This means that even if they don't synchronize, this religion is likely to last. Therefore, ultimately, it becomes a question of assimilation rather than independence. Now, lastly, focusing on what opening government case and what does that bring to the table. So basically, let's say, minorities don't have any power in parliament anyway, so our case doesn't stand. 4 response to that. 1, many times there are constitutional amendments and parts of the constitution that recognize minorities in the first place. You cannot do this under government. You cannot ever do this under government because you stop being a minority the point you have synchronized. You stop being a religious minority because you're Catholic. The second part is that even if you're a minority, you can still be 10% of society. That is a large number. Ultimately, you have leverage over society. But thirdly, even if you don't have political leverage, just being vocal, just being heard is ultimately what you can lead to opening government. When you say that you're part of an ethnicity, believes in a different religion, you have leverage. You can shout at the media and they're more likely to hear you. But fourthly, even if this doesn't happen, this exists at the both sides of the house. Minorities are minority and they have less power. The difference is that opening government is the ones taking away the power by taking away their individualism. So, lastly, what do we have under OO and what do we win this today? Ultimately, even if you don't buy our big societal impacts about religious extremism that is likely to lead to backlash, we are the only team in this debate that is likely to have personal impacts directly related to the people that believe in these religions. Ultimately then, if they or their sons or their grandchildren are removed almost violently from their own religion, they're likely to face massive pressure, they're likely to be very angry, they're likely to be very pissed off. The delta to this is massive because they're the ones that hurt the most, they're the minorities, not the majority. Ultimately, if you want for religious independence versus a weird type of new colonial assimilation, vote for OO.
Thank you to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. I invite Government Member to begin the back half.
Can you hear me? May I start? The main problem in opening government and what makes them vulnerable to opening opposition is that they never prove why this shift, why this blending and merging of religions and culture is going to be done in a good way and in an acceptable way. This is the main push of opening opposition. If I prove this framing to you, then I have already come prior to the opening half. I'm going to start with this right now. Why is this going to be done in a good way and why is this likely going to be accepted? Multiple points of mechanization. Firstly, notice that this is probably going to be done in a very gradual way. Notice historically this has been happening in a very gradual way. When opening opposition tells you, this assimilation is going to be so quick that you're going to lose entirety of your religion and entirety of your culture, this is merely an assertion. We can see that historically this was not done in such a way. But why is this going to be done in a gradual way? For the exact reason opening opposition tells you, you do not want backlash when you're doing this. You do not want, infighting within your religion, people pushing back on this, so on. This is why you have an incentive to do this in a way that is going to be acceptable by the people. Secondly, I want to say that this motion does not imply abandoning dogma and abandoning important parts of the religion, but blending in certain elements and certain part of the culture so we can make it more, palatable and, more better, so it can be more functional within the society that it exists in. For example, if you're a Christianity, you are not going to change 10 Commandments. You are not going to change 7 deadly sins. If you're a Muslim, you're not going to change pillars of Islam, but you're probably going to, take some stories from other religions and explain it to your religion, or have the same saints, or have the same, feasts and holidays and these kind of things. Which means that, given the fact that dogma is a very, important part of your religion, this is still something that is going to remain. The core of your religion is still going to remain the same on either sides of the house. For example, in Christianity, we have not abandoned Christmas, the birth of Christ, but we have just, put it on a different date. So this means that there is not going to be radical and all of these things. Secondly, I want to posit that this is probably going to be done with the religions that already are kind of similar, that already have, the similar background. So you're probably not going to blend in, for example, monotheistic religions and polytheistic religions and stuff like this. Thirdly, why is there going to be buying? This is probably going to be done by the main religious authority within your religion, like pope or priest or imams or something like this. Why is this relevant? Because you're probably, as a member of this religion, you're going to trust them that this is something that is good. Why is this so? Because you trust them the most, because A, they're the most proximate to God, they're the entity who is the closest to the divine being that you worship, and secondly, they're probably, the most educated, they know the religious script the best, and stuff like this. Fourthly, I want to argue that religious authorities are going to be able to justify this by using religious scripture. Why is this so? Because religious scripture are, are written in a very metaphoric way. They are written a long time ago, so they are subjected to a different types of interpretation. And notice that this is something that happens, and fifthly, this is something that happens all the time. For example, in Christianity, there was a quote that used to be used, that was interpreted in a way that it's homophobic, that used to be used to scrutinize gay people, but right now the same quote remains, the same teaching remains, we are just interpreting it in a different way. This is what we can do on our side of the house as well. Fifthly, I want to argue that religions are not static, rather they are dynamic. Religions are changing and adapting to the society all the time. I have multiple examples of this. For example, Islam abandoning halal slaughter in the Western countries, or Islam, interpreting and intertwining with culture of the Western feminism and stuff like this. But also Christianity, when opening opposition tells you, Christianity does not care about minorities and stuff like this. Christianity has literally abandoned the curse of Ham, which was a racist biblical teaching that existed before the civil rights movement in the America. This is what they have abandoned, which means that there are so many parts of religion and religious texts that have throughout the history been interpreted a different way and have been changed and all of these sorts of things, which means that this is something, there's already precedent for this. Religions have been doing this very successfully all the time. They can still do this on either side of the house. Lastly, I want to argue, even if you don't buy anything of this, even if there's going to be some dilution of the culture and of the religion and stuff like this, notice that there is no inherent value in a culture and all of these sorts of things. This is something that is highly assertive on their side of the house. Why is this so? Because like notice that culture is a complex, entity to explain. Notice that we all, like no one actually has like inherited culture. Like yes, we were under Ottomans, but we are still all drinking Turkish coffee or something like this. And so like all of the things, and we have like the similar words, like every single culture has been taken in bits and pieces of other cultures, and we have all been coerced into certain like behaviors and stuff like this that we all, are bringing to this day. I want to engage with top half right now.
We said that change will be long-term. I literally said slow and silent suffocation, but in the process the backlash can still happen. But also, if like most things don't change under your side, like why are you just taking leverage from these minority groups at the end of it?
Yeah, I have already dealt with this in my framing. Okay, moving on. So basically, and like I just want to posit, like the last reason is that there probably is incentive to have buy-in on this policy, on this thing. This is why you have an incentive to do this in a good way. What are the benefits of this? Notice that firstly, these minority religions are probably going to have more resources, right? Because like if you're like a 2% religion in a country, there's probably not a lot of buying. There's probably not a lot of like funding for your like how do you say, like the places where you're praying in and all of these sorts of things. Which means that if the Catholic Church that is more powerful is assimilated with you, sees you similar as you, they're more likely to give you more funding. But secondly, I want to talk more about assimilation, and I'm not going to be radical as opening up position because they're literally talking about conflict that existed for hundreds of years that cannot, like for example, like Shia Sunni Muslim conflict, they have like irreconcilable differences, like they cannot agree who the prophet is and stuff like this. I do not think that they can resolve these kind of conflicts on their side of the house because this is probably not going to, you're not probably going to merge religions that hate each other historically so much. What I want to talk about is areas where you have like multiple religions. I just want to like lower the burden, but it's so much more accessible and important, like more societal tolerance. For example, in Bosnia, when you have crossover of 3 different religions, they're not killing each other, but they just don't respect each other. Like my friend from Bosnia cannot like marry a Muslim boy and stuff like this. Like when our side of the house, what happens is that we pray to same saints, we celebrate same holidays, we have the same stories, which means that there's going to be more societal tolerance. Or like this person does not have such a like different values from me because they're praying to the same person I'm praying to, which means there's going to be more societal tolerance on our side of the house. For these reasons, very proud to stand on that bench.
Thank you, government member. I now invite opposition member.
Am I audible? Oh, okay, this seems fine. Okay, I want to do a little thank you speech. So because Paula didn't do one, maybe, I just want to thank not only Dean, because he's like the greatest coach ever, but I also want to, you can clap now. Okay, clap, okay. But I also, then you can clap for the next one, but I also want to thank other Zagreb seniors, right? Because they actually help us by like giving us programs and actually being still quality debaters. Some of them are in the ESL finals, some of them are behind me. They still make not only for a very good atmosphere, but also for like other people and coaches for you can do like debates in them. So yeah, big heart to them. Okay. I will be starting in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think that Paula realizes correctly that lack of incentive analysis is why top half fails. I will not only give you incentive analysis and fuel Obo's case as to why this will be oppressive and why you don't have political capital right now to do so, but know that our extension will rely on their crowd to real debate on their highest ground. This is the 2 points, this is our path to victory. Okay, they say you don't want to do this, you want to be good, right? So, and you want to be gradual in this. Okay, note by POI. I say that you don't have this incentive right now. Note, we are the status quo, okay? In the developing world right now, we still have big political capital. A lot of people like these religions, a lot of people turn to them. Why? 2 reasons. First, you have a lot of historical coercion, right? So this is very important for religious organizations 200 or 300 years ago. They did this a lot, right? They want to coerce people, right, back then, right? Firstly, and secondly, note that also because of NGO help, that these states rely on a lot, they tend to open up to Western organizations and these religions right now. These are literally the people and institutions that are helping them right now, and they're running safe houses in those failed states, right? So I think that for these two main reasons, there's lack of incentive for you to go and actively interpret incentive or like indigenous peoples and things like this. So this literally fuels their argument, right? Because we told you that you are going to suppress those cultures because you don't have an incentive to do so, right? Let's just talk about context for a bit, right? I think that this mostly happens in states where you already have these religions, right? These religions already exist to some extent, right? Because you probably don't have capital to go into African tribes that don't believe in like a national religion, because you probably want, because like to some extent this debate is about money, right? Big up to Bulgarians, right? Because you want to optimize your capital as an institution, right? And you don't want to go and push some people that you don't really care about, that you're not going to give some capital back, right? Okay, so let's see what happens, right? So I think that to some extent, let's fuel some more of the characterization that happens on them side. So, okay, even if this is good, okay, you still probably do a couple of things, okay? You probably still, to some extent, misinterpret the Holy Book, because you have to some extent still coerce, and you have to do something with the local cultures in those places, right? Know that to some extent, and more often, these cultures can be inherently different than Western cultures, right? They can be less or more masculine than Western cultures, right? They have different beliefs, they can less hierarchical in these things, right? You have to also connect with local saints and these things, right? So these things do happen. What is the biggest harm of this, and what is the characterization that we're being through right now, and what is the extension from CEO, right? The biggest problem is that the Westerners see this as westernization. Why does this happen so, right? Because in the status quo, you already have Westerners really sensitive to interpretations of religious texts, right? Because we have a trend in Western countries of cherry-picking Christians and people trying to interpret religious texts in a more progressive way, right? We tell you that for these reasons, religious books and religious institutions right now are extra sensitive to these misinterpretations, right? Note, what is the comparative then? Then you have either the status quo or the interpretation of religions right now already have buy-in, as I explained to you, or you're trying to misinterpret these things. Okay, so they try to say, but you have multiculturalism and you can have these things. But it isn't important. It's about the optics. Okay, what is the harm here, right? And let's wait, right? I think that the biggest harm here is twofold. Firstly, you get less political help from these Western states, and you can get less NGO help and things like this. This literally looks like more safe houses. They literally economic help, like the Red Cross, like Mary's Meals, people that things that give tangible help to people that can actually help people right now on the ground. Note that this is something that happens only on our side. Why? Because when you give this capital out, and when you want to give this finite amount of help, you want to give this to governments and religious organizations and countries that are the most proximate and like the most proximate to you, right? So you don't want to go to these countries that are going to misinterpret your religions, that you literally see this as heresy, right? And you don't want this to happen to do so, so you're probably not going to give help to them. You're probably not going to accept them in things like such as immigration programs and things like this. Why is this the most important insight of this debate, right? Firstly, generally on scale, right? Because these are tangible things that happen right now. Know that this argument independently is more important than all argument, right? Because they say our political capital, I think it's to some extent the most important thing that they try to push through their argument. The one incentive that needs to be proven for their argument to be actually important in this debate is how big is this political capital actually, right? Because notice, to some extent, you still see for the broader political spectrum, right? You still have a bunch of people not co-opting into religions more and more. We do not rely on this characterization, right? Because we rely on the characterization of religious, or the help of religious organization. They rely on the political capital of absolutely every person and absolutely every voter, right? So we don't know how likely their harms are actually to happen. Before I go, I'll take POI from opening.
Look, religious groups have incentives to spread their religion because they feel that it is their duty. But our side is the only alternative in which it can be done through dialogue. In your side, those people are seen as unreasonable and therefore are killed or segregated.
Okay. Yes, you need to seem reasonable. But for your argument to work, you need to see like to what extent you have to co-opt local messages to actually have buy-in. I proved to you, and closing opposition proves to you how you don't have to do that much, right? Going back to the two reasons that I gave out to you. Okay, so I think CEO brings the most important argument purely on scale, right? We have tangible benefits that happen on our side of the house only, right? And secondly, basically on vulnerability, we have the most important, right? Because only on our side, actual tangible help goes to the most important people, right? Because religious organizations only on our side want to help the most vulnerable and want to help the people who don't misinterpret the text and their religion, right? This is something that happens only on our side of the house. So even if you don't buy the first level of weighing, the first level and like actually believe that some sort of political capital happens on their side of the house, I think that we prove to you how we can help the most vulnerable factors. So even if you have a smaller scale, at the end of the day, we prove this on vulnerability. I think that we're the only ones to give actual incentive analysis as to what is the actual context of this relation and how does this actually happen. OO doesn't do this, and this is why CEO wins.
Thank you, opposition member. I invite Government Webb.
Okay, just to check them out. Well, like this? Yep. All right. Extremely simple structure. First dealing with CO, then dealing with OO, and finally dealing with OG. How do we win this debate? Note that even though CO's extension wants to be funded, this is something that doesn't necessarily respond to the Paula's framing around how essentially this is likely to be done and why it's likely to be accepted in that sense. That is to say, when CO wants to claim that you won't get the funding from the West because you're likely to get some sort of misinterpretations, but when the highest person on the hierarchy actually tells you, oh, you should be more like acceptable of the things that are going to be either adopted or not going to be adopted, I'm unsure why you have the vast majority of people being extremely conservative and against it, at the point of which the characterization is that this is the person closest to the God on earth that tells you to do these particular things. That is to say that I'm also not sure what's the comparative on their side of the house. Like if you have an independent religion, which is presumably a minority religion in some area, what are the connections and what is the bigger perhaps community that is likely to send funding to that to that independent religion? This is problematic because if you have those independent religions, they're likely to send you funding at the point of which you're completely the same as them, rather than if you have certain differences. It's so much harder for you to communicate at the point of which you don't have this kind of connections, dialogue, and interactions with the center and the top of the hierarchy, which is something that leads to you probably not getting the funding, but rather just like some general charity. I think the idea about the NGOs, the idea about helping the most vulnerable, etc., is in vast majority of cases uncompetitive. But if you have minority religion that is likely to communicate with majoritarian religion, you're much more likely to get the funding for you as well. I think we also probably then directly clash in the terms of the funding, but also in the terms of how this will be specifically beneficial for these individuals. Now let's deal with opening opposition and how do we win over them. Opening opposition asserts that you will have a huge clash and conflict because someone is taking away what you believe that is correct or not. No one is taking away anything. Like you literally just adapt certain things to your religion rather than taking the things out of it. At the point at which people stop practicing certain things, this probably means is not a priority inside of their own heads, but rather the other things are being prioritized. They never explain you what is the inherent value of the culture and why this is something that should be prioritized, especially at the people themselves that are actively practicing this culture are likely to throw it away. So maybe before hundreds of years it was normal to get married when you're 18, now we don't take, we literally do not care about that, and we have different priorities. Meaning that people on our side of the house with also the ability to drop certain things or to actively keep them because they actively, add them to their religion. So perhaps more important things are even better, better done and better accepted. That you still prefer is something that is likely to lead to people being more satisfied. Also note that their analysis is something that is contingent on you making huge change from the status quo and making this in a problematic way, which is exactly where Paula extension comes into the debate, with the explanation on how this is something that happens gradually, but also how it's not necessarily the necessity that you need to accept every single thing that is inside of this culture or minority religion and still get the benefit of the people buy-in and people feeling appreciated and people generally being happier inside of that particular religion, which is this being done fast is literally not a priority because it's about the signaling effects. That's why you can do it gradually. And also, why specifically with the analysis about hierarchies and how, when Pope tells you to do this, to be more open, and we have that kind of narrative spread, that you're less likely to have any kind of strong conservative streams on your side of the house. Before I go on, yes,
They have literally asserted a perfect balance between the two religions and keeping sovereignty while never engaging with the incentive analysis that we gave, check your notes, on why the dominant church has an incentive to gobble up the minority in the long term, not like in 5 years.
I'm not sure why in the long term. Like, if they feel guilty that perhaps they should bring God to people in order to perhaps have hope at the point of which they are extremely poor, or perhaps get some sort of benefits by at the point of which people accept that there, because no, we are not living 300 years ago. This is something that is problematic and a priority. But why the church is unlikely to do this? This still doesn't engage with our part of the extension. It is asserted that you, simply because you're dominant, you're not likely to be quite open and liberal. No, the church was scrutinized for doing that and being dogmatic in the past so much. This is to the extent that you had doubt in the top of the church and the hierarchy because of the way they practiced. Like with the poor people being exploited by the religion, etc. Meaning that they are likely to, take care of not having that kind of image of perhaps taking away someone's identity. Additionally, churches aware that you have conservative streams. That is to say that you're not likely to, do this in an extreme way, and you will have that gradual thing. But finally, even if you were scrutinized in the past for these particular things, you are in developed world right now, where you generally have more liberal streams. That is to say that in these situations, like you have that kind of push of the adaptability, and Paula specifically here uses a lot of examples that you have in the status quo on how is church becoming more progressive, meaning that the analysis that you have extremely, conservative top of the hierarchy right now is something that was needed from OO to be thus, and it didn't happen. And finally, weighing with OG, I think becomes simply logically prior. At the point of which opening government, first of all, limits their impact only on huge conflicts, rather than showing the probability that you have the capacity to resolve these certain things. We also widen the impact in the terms of the funding and the cooperation that is happening and how people essentially do feel or don't feel, and we specifically add in with the framing on why this will be done in a good way, which is necessary for our case to work.
Thank you, Gov Whip. To conclude the debate, I'll Whip.
Am I audible? Yeah? Okay, cool. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, what I think was the main problem with this whole debate is the characterization or the lack of it on why do we need religions and why do we need support from religions, right? Because the main stakeholder within this debate are the people that are directly impacted by the synchronization or the individualization of these religions, right? And we are the only side in this debate that actually gets the support, right? We are the only side that actually supports these people in order for them to actually benefit from like everything that all other teams are like bringing into this debate. Okay, structure of my speech today. First, I will deal with CG, then with OG, and finally Way with OO, why we win this debate. Okay, first of all, what's coming from CG, like the most important parts, are just like is the characterization of the blend and how it's gonna go. The first of all, we are telling you that, you know, like still the support from the West and the support that we are getting here, because we are talking about states where like these religions already exist, but there are some like cultural differences that like might overtake some places or whatever regions. We are telling you that, you know, like we are defending the status quo. That means that like the religions already exist in these parts of regions and like in these states. That means that like there's already buy-in. There's already buy-in within these religions, within these regions, which means like that people already want to opt out in these religions, like and like get all the benefits that they can get from like the support and like individual support or whatever. But also like the fact that blending even has to happen necessarily means that there's going to be less support from the main institution, right? Because in order to actually like pursue political leverage, in order to actually pursue the power within these regions, like with the religion itself, there is less incentive of the institution, of the main religious institution to even like, you know, like make these people actually like want to accept the religion, right? But also we're telling you, you know, like Lofa already explain why the support from these governments happens on our side of the house. But you know, like what CG misses, like the whole point within our speeches is the support that you get from the West, right? The support that you get from the main institutions, like the support that you get from Red Cross, Red Crescent, like these are the main institutions that can actually like benefit you and help you, you know, like not only spread the religion but also help individually these people. That is what we only get on our side of the house, you know. Because like here they won't have enough leverage, which means that like all the support that the CG is claiming we are taking on our side of the house. Now I will deal with OG. First of all, you know, like generally what we don't get from OG is just the explanation as to why we find religious important. Like here on like only CG is the one that proves to you, like, you know, like even with individual benefits that you get from like believing or whatever, you like the incentive and like the benefits that you get from funding and the benefits that you get from outside support are the most important things within this debate, right? Because we're telling you, you know, like you need to get the support, like in order to actually like for these individuals to benefit from this religion, except like their, I don't know, like personal beliefs or whatever, they need to get the support. You know, like the political dialogue argument that they bring into this, like the characterization of importance of religions and like how they tie to identity, like just doesn't stand. Because first of all, like if they're framing regions and their religions as like, you know, extremely conflicting and everything and like conflict prone, that means that, you know, like, and they're claiming that religious symbols are important to individuals. I don't really see how, like, if we tie religion so much to identity and like once we, you know, like make it like so different within the regions, why do we get the dialogue, right? Because if we find religion so important to our identities as like, you know, the main parts of our identities, I don't see how there are going to be less conflicts. On our side of the house, we're the only ones that get less conflicts, right? And like the political dialogue, because once you find something so important to your identity, you don't really want to exchange values, right? You want the other people to accept your values. That is why we get less conflicts on our side of the house and like more political dialogue within the sphere of individuality of religion. But also on the point of minorities, and like we already told you that big religions don't have enough incentive to spread them as much, because, you know, like they realize that they don't have power. Like that means that, you know, like it only leads to backlash and like generally like leads to the religions not having enough incentive to actually spread to those communities. Now, before I move on, I will take the point from opening.
Look, at the end of the day, religious groups will interact with each other. In our side of the house, we can still interact and access to their institutions without feeling that you're betraying your identity. CG gave new extensions on this. We were the first to prove it.
No, we are telling you that you still have the ability to connect to your culture. You still have the ability to connect to your identity. But on our side of the house, you're not actually getting the conflicts, right? Because if the conflicts, if the religion that you're tying to your identity is the main source of conflict, only on our side of the house we don't actually get the conflicts, right? Because we get the same religion, we get the same view on religion, and that is what Lofer is telling you, right? Because the only way that you don't let's say misinterpret the religion according to Westerners or according to the main institution is only when you get the same interpretation of it. That is the only way that you can get support. That is the only way that you can get funding and all the benefits that the OG is claiming as well. But now, generally, what CG is mostly bringing into this debate, it is the probability of getting the benefits, right? Because only on our side we get the true support, only on our side we get no conflicts. What is OO bringing into this debate and why we take over them? First of all, their framing of why religions and their unity are important is completely missed. Because the impact religion has on the most important stakeholders, which are the people within these regions, people that generally have some sort of cultural and religious differences, it's completely missed because these people, the most important part is not making the Westerners mad just because making the Westerners mad, right? It is the most important part is actually getting support from them, right? It is not only to make them mad. And, the nuances within this debate and within their speeches are completely missed. That is what CO brings into this debate, because the backlash from ultra religious people is not explained enough, right? It is not important if the backlash just happens and these people hate you. It is important within the scope of actual funding, within the scope of supporting the institutions, supporting the region, supporting the people within these communities. There is no we are the only ones that mechanize why it's important and why the support from the institutions is important. Because of all these reasons, because we are the only ones that prove to you why the religions are extremely important within this debate, and how it happens, how the individualization of religions actually happens on our side of the house, and how it brings the benefits that all the other sides are claiming to do. Please, CO.
Thank you, Ogwib, for that speech. Thank you to all speakers for the debate.